The Los Angeles Lakers have had multiple well-documented issues this year, and honestly, as much as I try, I just simply cannot avoid watching this team damn near every time they're on. I made a video less than 3 weeks ago that was supposed to be my final wrap-up of that team until there was some sort of major development. But there actually has been somewhat of a development since then, and it's kind of given me some deja vu, which inspired this video. And I'm surprised I'm not seeing more people coming away with the same takeaway as I am with this team, with what's going on right now with LeBron James carrying the team. The deja vu I have is an aging superstar player carrying a team that was supposed to be a super team that ultimately ended up being really disappointing. A super team that has a young star big man who ends up being disappointing and a veteran former MVP point guard. Both of these teams happen to play in Los Angeles, and they've happened less than a decade apart. I am of course talking about the 2013 Los Angeles Lakers and today's Los Angeles Lakers. And I think the commonalities between both of these teams less than a decade apart speaks to a common thread of thinking and a type of thinking that is very clearly flawed based on the results with both of these teams. So today I wanted to talk about the Lakers past and present and how history has repeated itself. Before I continue on with this video, about half of the people that watch these videos are not subscribed, so if you follow the 50%, then please subscribe. I am trying to hit 200,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so your subscription would be much appreciated. I am going on vacation after recording a bunch of videos consecutively, so I would like to hit that goal, but if I don't, I will have no idea. Well, I will have any idea, but you're not going to see me reacting to it until the start of January. But I would really like to hit that goal. 4K left to go. Can it happen? I don't know. Also drop a like on this video. Only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference. The parallels between the two of these teams can genuinely get very, very wild at some points. Like, there's so many things that line up that it's kind of insane. Let's go ahead and take a look at the mentality that both of these teams had going into the respective off seasons before they ended up creating the super team. The Los Angeles Lakers in the 2012 offseason had just come off of 2 years following a championship run where the team ended up disappointing and leaving the playoffs pretty prematurely, and the Los Angeles Lakers in the 2021 offseason had just come off of a year following a championship run where the team ended up disappointing and leaving the playoffs pretty prematurely. The only real difference between these two circumstances is one of these teams waited 2 seasons after the run and the other team waited 1. But that was the situation at hand with these teams, so what was the mentality of the front office that led to the drastic changes? Okay, our roster is getting older. We don't know how many years we can maximize these guys, so we need to make some more drastic moves to make sure we get the most out of what we have with the time we have it. Now, here is where the pathways kind of divulge, because what the 2012 Los Angeles Lakers chose to do was a whole hell of a lot more reasonable than what the 2021 Lakers ended up doing. Definitely less controversial. Trading for Dwight Howard was a no-brainer, especially for how little the Lakers ended up giving up. For a guy who 3 years ago they had faced in the NBA Finals, or it might have been, no, 4 years ago at this point, whatever, math. No, it's 3. 2009. They faced him in the finals and he had shown no signs of slowing down. Meanwhile, the Lakers traded for Russ in 2020 and it was immediately one of the most controversial trades in league history. And because of that controversy, I feel like there were pretty drastically different expectations for these teams going into the season. While the 2021 Lakers might have had some high expectations from some people, there was no consistent floor of what we expected. The 2013 Los Angeles Lakers were expected to be one of the best teams in the league and compete for a championship. In fact, pretty much any analyst in that offseason was going to slot in the Lakers as the Western Conference team and the Heat as the Eastern Conference team, and that would be the 2013 finals matchup. With the Lakers today, there were some people who thought they would be really good and some people who thought they would really suck. Where they end up landing in that scale, we'll have to wait and see. The Lakers in 2012 also traded for Steve Nash, who was 38 but still quite good. He was an all-star last season, so it's not like he was just garbage just because he was old. So that means that with both teams, it's an all-time great as their best player at the tail end of their careers, a veteran former MVP point guard who's not what he was, but is still very good, although in the case of Westbrook, he's a lot better than what Nash was at that point, and a young big man with a ton of expectations for his future with the franchise, and the hope that that young big would eventually fulfill the role as the number one as the torch gets passed as the all-time great player gets older. I'm telling you, these parallels are kind of nuts. And it keeps going. Because of course, both of these teams ended up being all-time disappointments, and among that disappointment, the big man was at the forefront. Now, as much slander as Anthony Davis has gotten as of late, and as much as he has deserved that slander, I'm not going to sit here and act as though he is just as disappointing as Dwight Howard was that one season with the Lakers, because drastically different. Now, to give him a little bit of a break, injury was a massive factor in Dwight Howard not being the player that we had hoped he would be. He was a massive disappointment nevertheless. But then last but not least, at the helm of all of this is the aging all-time great player who ends up having to carry the team because of how disappointing it is. Adding Dwight Howard and Steve Nash was all about making life easier for Kobe, and because they ended up sucking, it had the opposite effect, and Kobe had to carry this team, resulting in one of the best seasons of his career and the end of his career. In the case of LeBron, after starting off kind of whatever, he averaged 23, 5, and 6 in his first 8 games. Since then, as the Lakers have continued to disappoint, he has had to ramp up his game, and he has averaged 29, 8, and 7 over the last 13 games. And honestly, those numbers do not do it justice because he has been just insane lately on both ends of the floor. And it's not just the fact that he's putting up a lot of points, the fact that he's driving more, but also the fact that he is defensively a beast right now. He's had multiple blocks where I hate to do the cliche like, oh my God, LeBron's almost 37, but he's getting blocks like he's 23. And it's truly perplexing. But the only thing I fear is that LeBron at this stage of his career, not only with his age, but the fact that he's been a lot more injury prone as of late, we could see a similar fate with him this season as Kobe had in 2013. I don't know how sustainable burning it on both ends is really going to be for LeBron as he is 37 years old and year 19. In the case of Kobe Bryant, the 2013 season was essentially the end of his career because of his Achilles tear. If all of the strain of carrying this team for LeBron James builds up, we could see something just as bad. The writing is somewhat on the wall. It's not something that you can really predict, but it's something that I'm worried about because LeBron is logging heavy minutes and putting in a lot of effort when that's not something he really should have to do at this stage of his career. Now, the NBA today is more proactive about players' physical health, especially when it comes to the regular season, so I feel as though the environment is more safe for this to not happen. Granted, Kobe kind of perpetuated his own issues by insisting on playing through injuries constantly, which is a different conversation for another day, and I think LeBron is more likely going to opt to protect his long-term future, so there is that. But at the same time, there is also the fear of this year of LeBron's career being wasted, and that could result in him continuing this trend of a lot of minutes and a lot of energy put into each game. So I hope they don't, out of fear of this 1 year being wasted, ruin whatever the remaining years would be. But now let's talk about why things went so wrong. Honestly, in the case of the 2013 Lakers, it came down to injury and a lack of chemistry. Kobe and Dwight just were not compatible personalities. For the Lakers today, well, one, they could turn this thing around. At this point, I am pretty much giving up on the possibility of them turning it around to being like really, really good. Maybe they end up being less ass than they have been 30 games through the year, but I don't know if they're going to go to potentially besting the Suns or the Warriors at this point. But that said, we can definitely say it's not been a great situation. But as for them, it has been more about fit, and health has also been a factor. And honestly, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole again. There's a whole video about that again less than 3 weeks ago. Now, as for the mistakes actually made by the front office, again, in the case of 2013, the mistakes were less severe because the decision making was less brash and made more sense, not only from the short-term perspective, but the long-term as well. You'd be hard-pressed to convince anyone at the time that trading for Dwight Howard was a bad idea. Obviously, with some severe hindsight it was, but the trade made perfect fucking sense at the time. And honestly, for the modern Lakers, it might come down to a question of whether or not they jumped the gun. I know a lot of people are saying, even though Russell Westbrook has been good for the Lakers this year, it'd just be better to have all the role players they traded for him, and I kind of see their point of view on that, but at the same time, maybe that was a situation where they really couldn't run it back and they avoided wasting a couple of years trying to do so. But at the same time, the Russell Westbrook bell cannot be unrung. Is unrung a word? There's no fucking way that's a word. But really, I think the problem with both of these teams and the approach that they had was not actually the approach that they had, but rather the situation that they were backed into. Both of these teams were declining and they had a short window to turn things around, and as a result, it had some brash decision making and stuff that was short-sighted and ended up biting them in the ass. The lack of security for the future caused the chain reaction of short-sighted and poor decisions. Anyways, that was a weird coincidence and a weird-ass video, but I keep seeing these parallels, especially with LeBron carrying as of late. I really hope what I fear might happen does not end up happening, but shout out to Rudy for editing this video. That is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.